How do you explain to anyone that this man is the world's costliest defender? How would you explain to anyone that this man, Harry Maguire, plays for one of the biggest football clubs in the world, Manchester United, and was somehow able to trick them into signing him for that sum of money? The truth is that nobody can suddenly become a bad player overnight, but in this current football landscape, an average player can certainly be made into world class if he is lucky enough. Harry Maguire is a sign of how rapidly football is changing for the worse. How so many players, once they make it to the top, become arrogant.
But I wouldn't be playing every game for Manchester United in the starting 11 if I'd been playing bad every game or not playing well enough. There's a reason why both managers have put me in the starting 11 every game.
And how the fans, day by day, due to the influence of social media, becomes increasingly toxic. This is the sad story of how a once humble, down-to-earth guy became as arrogant and egotistic enough to become the latest and most brutal victim of a long line of scapegoats. Jacob Harry Maguire was born in Sheffield, South Yorkshire, England on the 5th of March 1993. He grew up in a football family with his father, a former amateur footballer who sadly never went pro, his mother and his two brothers Joel and Lawrence Maguire, who are now also footballers. Harry was an incredibly ambitious and determined kid. It is even said that during his childhood, he often came back from school with his entire outfit covered in mud, and instead of cleaning up, he'd go straight into the garden or his school playground green field outside his home with a ball at his feet for a football tournament known as May Day. He soon joined Sheffield United's youth team, where he even played with the likes of his fellow England international teammates Kyle Walker and John Stones. The whole world knew Maguire as a central defender, but he didn't used to play in that position. In fact, he was actually a central midfielder from age 16 to 18 in the Blades youth team. In the 2010-11 season, he was promoted to the first team amidst a relegation battle which they unfortunately lost. He only truly started shining in his second season, after which he was named both the club's Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year. By his third season, he became an undisputed first-choice defender, and his exploits led Hull City to sign him for £2.5 million despite the Blades' resistance. He was sent on loan during his first season at Hull to Wigan, by which, upon his return, the club was unfortunately relegated from the Premier League. They soon gained promotion back into the big time via playoffs by beating Sheffield Wednesday 1-0, with Maguire coming on as a late sub in order to waste time. His incredible performances in the 2016-17 season was unfortunately not enough, as Hull City got relegated for the second time during his time at the club. He was voted both the Player and Fans Player of the Year at the club, and as is often the case with relegated teams, Hull City lost Maguire to Leicester City in June 2017 for an initial transfer fee of £12 million. He spent 2 spectacular years at Leicester City and was named Player of the Year in only his first season at the club. It was during this time that the world started to take notice of Maguire, and soon after the 2017-18 season, he was selected to be part of the England national team ahead of the 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia. Contrary to popular beliefs, Maguire didn't used to be this arrogant. He was super friendly, humble, and was always willing to help people. The guy was literally just so cool and down to earth. There was even a viral story at the time of Maguire's early introduction to the England squad about how, despite being a footballer who could buy designer bags, he chose to carry his stuff in a trash bag. Everything was going so well in his life at this point in time until he encountered his first problem: the English media. There's always been this trope about the English media that when an extremely talented English player starts to climb the rank at club level, the media starts to overhype and overrate them while they're still developing. The problem with this is that during the crucial period when the player is pretty much vulnerable to external pressure, they start to chase or try to meet up with the very high standard and expectations that their abilities at the time just couldn't match. That's why I commend Pep Guardiola's efforts in the protection of Phil Foden, a player which Guardiola himself indirectly rated on the same level of a young Lionel Messi. Guardiola did his best to protect Foden from the media and avoided overexposing him because the media were already setting high bars for him, even before he became a first-team regular under Guardiola. He didn't succumb to the media's pressure on always playing Foden until he felt he was mature enough to handle it. After all, he is the manager and the media don't have enough information on how the player is like compared to the info Pep has due to the fact that he is his manager. And look at him now, his career is still on track. Now compare that to Marcus Rashford. An extremely talented player, yes, but was given way too much hype and responsibility that his age just couldn't handle. Long story short, Solskjaer overplayed him and he received enormous backlash at the end of the Euros last year, after which he had to seek therapy to get his career back on track. This overexposure of young players or players who were just getting exposure is really dangerous, and in extreme cases, it destroys the person completely. Maguire was never world class and he may never be, but the media at the time never saw it that way. After just his first season at a top club like Leicester City with no prior European experience whatsoever, someone thought it was fitting enough to value a defender who doesn't have the appropriate European experience to be valued around £70 million. Who could blame Leicester City though? Their aim was to turn in a maximum profit on the players they signed, and Maguire's goal in the World Cup against Sweden, along with the media hype over that England squad, was all Leicester City needed to add fuel to the fire. Now, all they were looking for was someone who was gullible enough to pay that kind of money, but not so fast. It wasn't Manchester United at first because Jose Mourinho, the manager at the time, refused to sign the defender over 50 million. But after the sacking of Jose, what did Manchester United do? They went back for Maguire a year later after yet another stellar season at Leicester City and decided to make him the world's most expensive defender in history when they paid £80 million to get him. Now, just my opinion here, it appears that around this period, the Manchester United board was not really confident in their scouting team as the club continued to produce more transfer flops, so they decided to basically wait until their rivals were interested in a player and then drag it out with them. After all, Man City seems to get a lot of their recruitment right, and judging by the fact that in January 2018, Liverpool and Manchester City battled for Southampton defender Virgil van Dijk, Liverpool won, making him the world's most expensive defender, and it turned out great. So that is why it makes perfect sense to battle City for Maguire, even though you previously did the same thing with Alexis Sanchez not too long ago and it didn't really work out. But yeah, genius. Maguire was average and definitely overpriced, but at first, there was a real chance that he could have pulled off a Virgil van Dijk here. But what Manchester United failed to realize was that Van Dijk didn't play in England all his life and actually required experience from both his home country, the Netherlands, and Scotland. He played in two different leagues under different managers with different styles, while a majority of Harry's managers have mostly been English, and you don't need me to tell you the stereotypes surrounding English managers and how they play, or mostly managers who adopt a cautious, defensive and counter-attacking approach to games. He was exactly the type of player that Manchester United needed to play under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who often adopted a counter-attacking approach to games, so he sat deeper with his team's defensive line, with his protection being the team's style of play. But when Solskjaer was booted out and was replaced by Ralf Rangnick, who often urges his team to move high up the pitch to press, Maguire's lack of pace was brutally exposed, literally. To add insult to injury, stats comparing Maguire's final season at Leicester City to the 2019-20 of his replacement Kagler Soyuncu showed that Leicester City didn't really need Maguire, as Soyuncu bested him in every category possible except aerial duels, and that's because of the obvious difference in height. Nothing to control there. It just shows that Manchester United paid £80 million for a player who was easily replaceable at his former club by virtue of the hype he was receiving at the time. And it also didn't help that Leicester City became instant title challengers the season after Maguire left. The result of said hype was seen when in the summer of 2020, Harry Maguire was arrested while at Mykonos, Greece, on the charges of aggravated assault, resisting arrest, and attempted bribery. In the process of his arrest, he was allegedly reported trying to use his position as Manchester United's captain to get himself out of the situation. This was a period where even the most die-hard Maguire fans lost all respect for him. First, there was the controversy surrounding his appointment as captain after mere months of just signing for the club, while there were veterans like David De Gea and Juan Mata who were better qualified by virtue of age and time spent at the club, and then this incident in Greece. Now this season, after a long line of scapegoats due to poor performances, when it came to Maguire's turn, the abuse somehow got even more intense. He became a meme, a joke, and wasn't getting the same level of protection he was getting anymore. At the infamous interview he gave where he stated that Solskjaer and Rangnick were still selecting him for a reason, and that's because he plays very well, didn't do him any favors. He was completely oblivious to the fact that they really couldn't drop him because of his price tag, or in other words, he was a burden to them because of his price tag. But that's in the case of Rangnick though. Solskjaer does have a history of selecting certain players regardless of their form, and it's the same with England boss Gareth Southgate. Maguire was under pressure every time he stepped onto the pitch. How else would you explain the frequency of all these accidents? He didn't turn into a bad player overnight. Fan pressure made it this way, and it was honestly kind of his fault. And yet again, not so much. You see, although Maguire is seen as the world's most expensive defender, he never asked the media to rate him so highly, he never asked Leicester City to make his price tag that high, and he never asked for a club to be so gullible enough to pay that kind of money for him. All of these things were completely out of his control, yet some people hold him accountable for this. He has gotten so badly that whenever he was on the pitch, the opposing team always targeted him as a weak link. Even when he had solid performances, social media trolls always have something to bring out of context to use against him. He was even once booed by England fans even before stepping on the pitch, an incident which Gareth Southgate labelled as a disgrace. He never even messed up once for England, but yet he was booed anyway. But you could almost understand the reason for the hatred though. Maguire never handled the situation properly, and the culture of what modern football has now turned to molded him from a humble and helpful guy to an arrogant, egotistic maniac who even reportedly clashed with Cristiano Ronaldo over the squad's fragile mentality. But where do you draw the line between criticism and abuse? On the 22nd of April 2022, Harry Maguire was reported to have received bomb threats on himself and his family. He was supposedly the problem in the defense, and yet the team lost 4-0 to Brighton without him.
I'm really proud to be here for such a big club, and I'm really looking forward to get started. I'm a team player, I'll give everything I can for the team and give everything I've got for this club.